now we get to the fun part where we import the assets into Unity and see what it actually looks like in the game. So I've created an empty scene, and I'm going to create a folder for put the assets in for this scene. And to import textures in Unity, all you have to do is select them and then just drag them into the interface. Next, we're going to import the panel from Blender, the wooden panel. There it is. We're going to create our own material for this, so we're not going to import the material from Blender. Alright, now let's start to build an environment here. Alright, I've created a quad that we can stage our flooring material on. Let's start with that. So we have textures imported, but now we need to make a material. A material is basically a combination of a shader and texture maps. So the shader sort of tells the renderer what to do with the texture maps in order to create a surface. I'm going to use a custom shader that I made myself. My custom shader has slots for two textures. One is a primary texture map, which uses the object's texture coordinates, but there's also a second texture which is a background noise texture, and that's in world space. So for this object, we're going to use the wood grain as our background noise texture, and you can see it's in world space, so no matter where I move the object, the texture's in a fixed position. Now I'm going to add a primary texture, and that's going to be our hardwood plank texture. That one is in object space, so you can see when I move the object, the texture moves with it. Now later on, when I create the wallpaper, you'll see how I use this these two textures to create variations of the same object. Right, you can see there's definitely some visible texture seams, and that's because we didn't really do anything to prevent that when we were creating our textures. But that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll see how it looks in the end. Yeah, let's create one of our wood panels here and see if we can apply the texture to that also. Okay, let's create a new material for the panel. I'm going to use the same custom shader. We're going to use the same wood grain texture. But we're going to use the texture that we specially made for the wood panel. So that's what it looks like. Now we blend. The wood, and let's make it a little darker. Actually, no, you know what? Let's make the floor darker. The thing is, we don't want them to look too similar. We want them to look a little bit different. Let's see what it looks like when we put two of them next to each other. I don't don't really line up, do they? Oh well, that's something I'll fix later on. And you know what? They seem like they're too big compared to the floor, so we may have to scale them differently. Wallpaper. For this one, we're going to use the same custom shader. This time we're going to use our watercolor. Put in our wallpaper texture here for the main. Except let's increase the scale of our world space texture here by a significant amount. There we go. We should see some color variation in the texture here. See how each of these pieces has different splotches on it. That's kind of the point of the world space texture, is that you get a little bit different piece on each one. Yeah, so here's our character here. We can tell that the proportions here are probably way off. Let's change this. Alright, so I've adjusted the scale and some of the other properties on this. And let's see what it looks like. Yeah, so this is what it looks like in the game with the post-processing. I think the colors are a little bit saturated though, so I'm going to adjust that. Okay, I think that looks okay. Now let's see if we can make some sort of bay window here using the pieces we already have. One of these. Alright, to create a smooth transition between the bay window and the wall, I'm going to create a column here using just a Unity cube and stretching it out, scaling it. And let's make just a plain wood texture. So we have our wooden floor and we have our wooden panel. But let's just make one that's wood, grain, and nothing else. So I'm going to use the same shader as before, but now I'm going to put nothing in my primary texture slot. And in my detail texture slot, I'm going to put the wood. Alright, now we'll just copy and paste this to the other side here. Let's kind of box this in. Now, no one will ever know that this, oops, fell off the edge of the world. No one will ever know that this is actually just the same thing as the wall panel and that there's a whole wooden panel underneath here. Okay, now this is the point where we can make our little window. Let's see, what size and shape do we want to make it? Let's scale it up a little bit this way, but we want it to be long and tall. Let's sort of fill up this whole area here. Alright, that seems about right. So we're going to make a material for the window. Remember, we already have a texture for the window, but instead of the same custom shader, we're going to use a different shader this time. We're going to use an unlit shader. The reason for the unlit shader is it's going to be bright white no matter how dark it is in the room. So it's going to, actually it's going to appear to glow because of the bloom effect that we have on the camera. Alright, so that's looking like the start of a nice Victorian mansion here.